The airplane's hum was a steady heartbeat. But for Elias Navarro, it was the pulse of a battlefield. At 30,000 feet, the first-class cabin of Flight 217 to New York was a glittering cage of egos. And Elias, a flight attendant with 5 years of skies behind him, knew how to navigate it. But nothing could have prepared him for the man in seat 3A. Elias adjusted his navy blue vest, his warm brown eyes scanning the cabin. His smile, practiced yet genuine, was his armor. He'd learned early that charm could defuse even the most entitled passengers. Most, not all. In 3A sat Victor Langston, billionaire tech mogul, whose name alone could make markets tremble. His sharp jaw and tailored suit screamed power, but it was his cold, calculating stare that set Elias on edge. "Champagne, sir," Elias offered, holding out a crystal flute. His voice was smooth, professional, with a hint of his Miami upbringing. Victor barely looked up from his tablet. "Make it quick," he muttered, his tone clipped. "And don't hover. I don't need a fairy fluttering around me." The word hit like a slap, but Elias didn't flinch. He'd heard worse whispers, slurs, the occasional drunk passenger who thought they could spit venom and walk away unscathed. 5 years in the air had thickened his skin, but the sting never fully faded. Behind him, a young woman in 4B, her phone subtly angled, froze mid-scroll. Her eyes flicked up, catching Elias's. She'd heard it too. Elias set the flute down with deliberate care, his smile unwavering. "Enjoy, sir." He moved on, his heart pounding but his steps steady. The cabin was a stage, and he wouldn't let Victor steal the show. Victor Langston wasn't just rich, was untouchable. At 42, he'd built an empire on AI-driven logistics, his company's algorithms dictating the flow of global commerce. He thrived on control, and the confined space of a plane irritated him. People like Elias too polished, too poised grated on his nerves. He didn't know why the flight attendant's easy confidence unnerved him, but it did. Maybe it was the way Elias moved, unapologetic, or the pride pin on his vest, a tiny rainbow flag that seemed to dare Victor to react. In 4B, Mia Chun, a 27-year-old freelance journalist, tightened her grip on her phone. She'd been recording a vlog about her first-class experience, a treat after a grueling assignment in Seattle. But now, her lens had caught something else: Victor's casual cruelty, Elias's restrained grace. Her pulse quickened. This wasn't just a moment. It was a story. She kept recording, her thumb steady, her mind racing with possibilities. Elias, meanwhile, retreated to the galley, his hands trembling as he poured coffee for another passenger. His mind replayed Victor's words, each syllable a jab. Fairy. He'd heard it in high school, in Miami's humid hallways, where being out wasn't just bravado, was reckless. He'd fought for his place in the world, from a Cuban-American kid in a conservative neighborhood to a flight attendant who owned every aisle he walked. But men like Victor reminded him the fight never ended. In the cabin, Victor leaned back, oblivious to the storm he'd sparked. He sipped his champagne, his mind already on the New York boardroom where he'd crush his next deal. He didn't notice Mia's phone, or the way her eyes narrowed, or the quiet fury building in the man he'd dismissed. Elias wasn't alone in the galley for long. His colleague, Sarah, a sharp-witted veteran with a Boston accent, slid in beside him. "You okay, hon?" she asked, her eyes scanning his face. She'd seen the exchange from across the cabin. "I'm fine," Elias lied, forcing a grin. "Just another day at 30,000 feet." Sarah didn't buy it. "That guy's a jerk. You want me to accidentally spill coffee on his Armani?" Elias laughed, the sound easing the knot in his chest. "Tempting, but I'd rather keep my job." He glanced at the curtain separating the galley from the cabin. He's not worth it. But he was. Not because of the slur, but because of what it represented. Elias had spent years proving he belonged here. In this uniform. In this life. He wasn't just a flight attendant. He was a survivor. A man who'd carved out his identity against a world that often refused to see him. Victor's words weren't just an insult, they were a challenge. Back in the cabin, Mia's fingers flew across her phone. She wasn't just recording now. She was editing, splicing the clip of Victor's sneer with Elias's composed response. She knew who Victor was. His face was plastered across Forbes and CNBC. A takedown like this could go viral, but it could also backfire. She hesitated, her thumb hovering over the post button. Was it worth the risk? As the plane droned on, Elias returned to the cabin, his smile back in place. He served drinks, chatted with passengers, and avoided 3A. But Victor's presence lingered, a shadow over the flight. And in 4B, Mia made her choice. She hit post, and the video began its journey into the digital ether, a spark that would soon ignite a firestorm. The flight was halfway to New York when the first notification pinged on Victor's phone. Then another. And another. He frowned, swiping open his screen. A tag on X. Then 10. Then 100. The video was short, 15 seconds, but it was damning. His voice, clear as day. I don't need a fairy fluttering around me. Elias's poised response followed, his dignity a stark contrast to Victor's pettiness. The caption read, Billionaire Victor Langston mocks flight attendant on Flight 217. This is who he really is. Victor's jaw tightened. He glanced around, suddenly aware of the eyes on him. The man in 3C, a middle-aged lawyer, stared over his glasses. The woman in 2A whispered to her seatmate. Victor's world, built on control, was slipping. Elias, unaware of the video, felt the shift in the cabin's energy. Passengers were quieter, their glances heavier. He caught Mia's eye again, and this time, she gave him a small, knowing nod. Something was happening, but he didn't know what. In the galley, Sarah was already scrolling X. Elias, she whispered, holding up her phone. You need to see this. He took the phone, his breath catching as the video played. His own face stared back at him, calm under pressure, while Victor's words echoed. The comments were a flood outrage, support, calls for accountability. Elias's heart raced. This wasn't just his fight anymore. Victor, meanwhile, was typing furiously, his PR team already on damage control. But the internet was merciless, and the video was spreading faster than his empire could contain. He looked up, catching Elias's silhouette at the front of the cabin. For the first time, Victor felt something unfamiliar, vulnerability. The plane descended into JFK, the city's lights a glittering promise below. Elias braced for landing, his mind spinning. The video had changed everything. He wasn't just a flight attendant now, was a symbol, a spark for a conversation he hadn't started. But he wasn't naive. He knew the cost of visibility, especially for someone like him. Mia, packing her bag, felt a mix of triumph and dread. The video had thousands of views already, and her name was attached. She'd wanted a story, but this was bigger than she'd imagined. As she stepped off the plane, she glanced at Elias, wanting to say something but unsure what. Victor was the last to deboard. He avoided Elias's gaze, his phone still buzzing with notifications. The world he'd built was unshakable until now. For Elias, the fight was just beginning. But for the first time in years, he felt seen. Not as a fairy, but as a man who'd stood his ground. And somewhere in the digital void, the video kept spreading, carrying Elias's story to places he couldn't yet imagine. The terminal at JFK was a chaos of rolling suitcases and hurried voices. But for Elias Navarro, it was a moment of stillness. He stood by the gate, his navy blue cap tucked under his arm, watching passengers stream past. The weight of the video lingered. A quiet storm he could feel, but not yet see. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Texts from Sarah. From friends. From strangers. The clip Mia had posted was no longer just a moment. It was a movement. Elias wasn't ready for this. He'd spent his life keeping his head down, smiling through the slurs, proving himself in a world that often looked past him. Being out as a gay man in Miami's Cuban-American community had been a quiet rebellion, one he'd fought with charm and grit. But now, his face was on screens across the country, a symbol of defiance he hadn't chosen to be. He glanced at his phone. The X app opened. The video had 50,000 views now, and the comments were a battlefield. Some called him a hero, others a snowflake. One user wrote, "Victor Langston's just saying what we all think." Another, "Elias deserves better. Fire Langston." His stomach twisted. This wasn't just about him, Anna Maria. It was about every person who'd ever been diminished by a word, a look, a sneer. Across the terminal, Victor Langston sat in a private lounge, his fingers drumming on a glass of scotch. His PR team was in overdrive, drafting statements, fielding calls from reporters. The video was everywhere: CNN, BuzzFeed, even international outlets. His company's stock had dipped 2% in after-hours trading, a small but stinging blow. Victor wasn't used to losing control. He'd built his empire on precision, on bending the world to his will. But this was chaos. He replayed the video, his own voice grating in his ears. Fairy. He hadn't meant it to sound so cruel. It was just a throwaway line, a jab to assert dominance. But the camera hadn't caught his intent. It had caught his words, raw and ugly. He thought of Elias, the flight attendant's steady gaze, the way he hadn't flinched. Victor hated that composure. It made him feel small. His assistant, Claire, approached cautiously. "Sir, we've got a statement ready. It emphasizes your commitment to diversity and—" "Save it," Victor snapped. "I'm not groveling." He stood, pacing the lounge. "Find out who posted that video. I want a name." Claire hesitated. "It's already public. Mia Chun, a journalist." She tagged herself. Victor's eyes narrowed. A journalist. Of course. Someone looking for clout, riding his name to relevance. He'd dealt with her kind before. But as he scrolled through X, the outrage grew louder. Hashtags like Boycott Langston and Justice for Elias were trending. He slammed his phone down. This wasn't over. Mia Chun was no stranger to risk. She'd covered protests, corruption scandals, even a cartel bust in Mexico. But sitting in her cramped Brooklyn apartment, watching the video's view count climb into the hundreds of thousands, she felt a new kind of adrenaline. She'd wanted a story, but this was a wildfire. Her inbox was flooded: support, hate, interview requests. A major news outlet wanted her on air tomorrow. Another offered a column. But the messages that hit hardest were from people like Elias: queer folks, service workers, anyone who'd ever been belittled by someone untouchable. She opened her laptop, drafting a follow-up post. This isn't just about one flight. It's about power, privilege, and the courage to stand up. Elias Navarro didn't ask to be a hero, but he is one. She hesitated, then added, "And to Victor Langston, words have consequences." She hit post, her heart racing. This was her shot, but it came with a target on her back. Elias's apartment in Queens was a small sanctuary, filled with plants and photos of his family. His mother's voice echoed in his mind. "Mijo, you're stronger than they know." He needed that strength now. Sarah had driven him home, her usual banter replaced with quiet concern. "You sure you're okay?" she'd asked, idling outside his building. "I will be," he'd said, but he wasn't sure. He sat on his couch, scrolling through the comments on Mia's post. Some were kind, others vicious. One caught his eye. "You're an inspiration, Elias. Don't let him win." It was signed, Ryan, Chicago. Elias's throat tightened. Ryan, whoever he was, had seen him, not just the flight attendant, but the man. His phone rang. It was his supervisor, Linda. "Elias, the airline's getting calls about the video. They want you to make a statement." A statement? Elias's voice was sharp. "I didn't start this." "I know," Linda said softly. "But the world's watching. You've got a chance to say something real." Elias hung up, his mind spinning. He didn't want to be a spokesperson, a martyr, or a victim. He just wanted to do his job, to live his life. But Victor's words had taken that choice away. He opened his laptop, searching for Mia Chun. Her profile was bold. Unapologetic, a journalist who chased truth. He typed a message. "Thank you for posting. I don't know what happens next, but I'm grateful." Victor's Manhattan penthouse was a fortress of glass and steel. But tonight, it felt like a cage. He stood by the window, the city's skyline glittering below. His phone buzzed again, his board of directors, demanding a meeting. The video wasn't just a PR crisis. It was a threat to his legacy. He thought of his father, a steelworker who'd taught him to never show weakness. Apologizing felt like betrayal. But then he saw the latest post from Mia Chun, tagging him directly. Words have consequences. The audacity of it burned. He called Claire. "Get me everything on this, Mia Chun." And the flight attendant. "I want leverage." Claire's voice was tight. "Sir, maybe we should focus on de-escalating." "Do it." Victor snapped. He wasn't going down without a fight. Elias didn't sleep that night. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the weight of the world pressing down. He thought of his first flight, 5 years ago, when he'd felt invincible in his uniform. He thought of the pride pin he wore, a small act of defiance. And he thought of Victor, a man who'd built an empire but couldn't see the humanity in front of him. By morning, the video had 1 million views. Elias's name was trending alongside Victor's. Reporters were outside his building, their cameras flashing like vultures circling. He pulled his curtains shut, his heart pounding. This wasn't just a story, Anna Maria, it was his life. Mia, too, was awake, her phone buzzing with notifications. She'd expected backlash, but not this. Death threats mingled with messages of support. She opened Elias's message, her chest tightening. "I'm grateful." She hadn't realized how much those words would mean. As the sun rose over New York, 2 worlds were colliding: Elias's quiet resilience, Victor's unyielding pride, and Mia's relentless pursuit of truth. The story was far from over, and the stakes were higher than any of them could have imagined. The morning sun cut through Elias Navarro's curtains, sharp and unrelenting. His queen's apartment, usually a haven, felt like a bunker under siege. Reporters camped outside, their voices a low hum through the walls. Elias hadn't left his couch since dawn, his phone a ticking bomb of notifications. The video was at 2 million views now, and his name was a hashtag. Justice for Elias trended alongside Boycott Langston, but so did uglier tags, ones that twisted his identity into a weapon. He muted his phone, but the silence only amplified his thoughts. He wasn't a stranger to scrutiny. Growing up gay in a tight-knit Cuban-American family had taught him to brace for judgment. His mother had come around, her love fierce but hard won, while his father still called his life a phase. Elias had built his own world, friends, a career, a community, but this was different. The video had made him a symbol, and symbols were targets. His doorbell buzzed. He froze, expecting another reporter. Instead, it was Sarah, her arms full of coffee and bagels. "You look like hell," she said, pushing past him. "Eat something before you face the world." "I'm not facing anything," Elias muttered. But he took the coffee. This is a nightmare. It's also a chance, Sarah said, her Boston accent sharp. You've got a platform now. People are listening. Elias shook his head. I didn't ask for this. I just want to do my job. Sarah sat beside him, her eyes soft but firm. You think guys like Victor Langston ever stop? They don't. Not unless someone makes them. In Manhattan, Victor Langston's penthouse was a war room. His PR team crowded around a glass table, laptops glowing with crisis plans. The stock was down another 1%, and sponsors were pulling out of his upcoming tech conference. Victor stood apart, staring at the skyline, his jaw tight. He'd spent decades building an empire, outsmarting rivals, dodging scandals. These 15-second clip shouldn't have shaken him. But it had. Claire, his assistant, handed him a tablet. We've got intel on Mia Chun, freelance journalist, 27, based in Brooklyn. She's got a following, but no major backing. The flight attendant, Elias Navarro, is 29, works for Skyhaven Airlines. Clean record. Well-liked. Victor's eyes skimmed the file. Elias's photo stared back at candid from an airline event. His smile warm, his pride pin gleaming. Something about it stirred Victor's unease. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone so ordinary. Draft a lawsuit, he said, tossing the tablet back. Defamation. Invasion of privacy. Whatever sticks. Claire hesitated. Sir, that could backfire. The public's already against you. Then make them see reason. Victor snapped. Spin it. I'm the victim here ambushed by an opportunist with a camera. But even as he spoke, doubt crept in. The video was raw, unedited. His words were his own. And Elias's composure at quiet strength made Victor's sneer look petty. He hated that most of all. Mia Chin's Brooklyn apartment was a mess of notebooks and coffee cups. Her laptop the eye of the storm. The video had hit 5 million views, and her follower count was skyrocketing. She'd been invited to 3 morning shows, but the hate mail was piling up too. You're ruining a man's life for clout. One read. Die, bitch, said another. She deleted them, her hands shaking, but kept working. This wasn't about fame, it was about accountability. Her phone pinged with a new message from Elias. Can we talk? I don't know how to handle this. She stared at the words, guilt prickling her skin. She'd posted the video without his consent, turning his life upside down. But she'd also given him a voice. She typed back, meet me at the Bean on 7th Avenue. 2 p.m. I owe you a coffee and an explanation. At the coffee shop, Elias arrived first, his cap pulled low. He felt exposed, every glance from a stranger a potential judgment. When Mia walked in, her energy was a mix of fire and nerves. She was shorter than he'd expected, her dark hair pulled into a messy bun, her eyes sharp but kind. I'm sorry, she said, sliding into the seat across from him. I didn't ask you before posting. I saw what he did, and I couldn't stay quiet. Elias studied her. You didn't just post a video. You started a war. Mia winced. I know. But men like Victor, they don't change unless they're forced to. I've seen it in my work. Power protects power. Elias sipped his coffee, the bitterness grounding him. I'm not a hero, Mia. I'm just a guy who got insulted on a plane. You're more than that, she said fiercely. You stood your ground. That's not nothing. He didn't respond, but her words settled into him. For years, he'd navigated the world by blending in, defusing tension with a smile. But maybe Sarah was right, maybe this was his chance to fight. Victor's team worked through the night, flooding X with counter-narratives. Bots amplified posts calling Mia a clout chaser and Elias a sensitive snowflake. But the public wasn't buying it. The video's authenticity was its power, no filter. No spin. Just truth. By noon, Justice for Elias was trending globally, and protests were forming outside Langston's headquarters. Victor watched the news from his office, his temper fraying. His board was pushing for an apology, but he refused. Apologizing meant admitting weakness, and Victor Langston didn't do weak. Instead, he called his lawyer. File the lawsuit. Now. But as he hung up, a new notification popped. UPA response from Elias on X. It was simple. Just a few lines. I'm not here to tear anyone down. I just want to be seen as human. We all do. Justice for Elias. The post was gaining traction, its sincerity cutting through the noise. Victor stared at the words. A flicker of something guilt, maybe stirring in his chest. He pushed it down. This was a game, and he'd win it. Elias and Mia left the coffee shop as allies, their conversation a fragile bridge. Mia promised to amplify his voice, not just her own. Elias agreed to speak out, but on his terms. As they parted, he felt a shift, a spark of courage he hadn't known he had. Back home, he opened his laptop, drafting a statement for the airline. I've spent my life serving others, in the air and on the ground. What happened on Flight 217 wasn't just about might, was about every person who's been dismissed, diminished, or dehumanized. I don't want revenge. I want respect. He sent it to Linda, his heart pounding. The world was watching, and for the first time, Elias was ready to speak. The studio lights burned hot, and Elias Navarro felt their glare like a spotlight on his soul. He sat on a sleek chair at CNN's New York studio, his navy blue suit a nod to his airline uniform, his pride pin gleaming on his lapel. Across from him, the anchor, a woman with a sharp smile and sharper questions, leaned forward. Elias, you've become a symbol overnight. How does it feel to have the world watching? Elias's throat tightened. He'd rehearsed his answers with Mia, but the weight of the moment was crushing. It's overwhelming, he said, his voice steady despite the nerves. I didn't ask for this. I just want to do my job and be treated like anyone else. The anchor nodded, her eyes flicking to the camera. Victor Langston's team claims you're exaggerating the incident for attention. What's your response? Elias took a breath, picturing his mother's fierce love, his years of smiling through slurs. I don't need to exaggerate, he said. The video speaks for itself. I'm not here to destroy anyone. I am here to remind people that words matter. Respect matters. The interview aired live, and within minutes, X was ablaze. Elias's words, raw and honest, resonated. Respect Matters trended alongside Justice for Elias, and his statement became a rallying cry for those who'd felt invisible. But not everyone cheered. Trolls flooded his mentions with hate, calling him a fraud, a victim playing for sympathy. Elias ignored them, but each one stung. Victor Langston watched the interview from his office, his fists clenched. Elias's composure, that same infuriating calm from the plane, was now on national television. Victor's lawsuit was filed defamation, emotional distress, the works, but his lawyers warned it might not hold. The video was too damning, the public too angry. His board was fracturing, with some urging him to step down as CEO. He called Claire. Get me on a show? Any show. I need to tell my side. Claire's voice was tight. Sir, the optics aren't good. An apology would. No apology. Victor snapped. I'm not the villain here. But he was starting to feel like one. His empire was built on control, yet he was losing it. A flight attendant, a journalist, and a viral video. He opened X, scrolling through Elias's interview clips. The man's sincerity was disarming, a contrast to Victor's polished arrogance. For the first time, Victor wondered if he'd miscalculated. Mia Chun was in her element, her Brooklyn apartment now a command center, She'd been invited to speak on MSNBC, but she insisted Elias take the spotlight first. Her role was to amplify, not overshadow. She posted updates, linking to Elias's interview, and wrote a piece for an online outlet. Elias Navarro isn't just a flight attendant's a mirror, showing us who we are when power meets humanity. Her phone rang a producer from a major network. We want you and Elias together. Prime time. Can you make it happen? Mia hesitated. Elias was still reeling, and she didn't want to push him. But this was bigger than both of them now. She texted him, primetime offer. You in? His reply came fast. Let's do it. They met at a diner near the studio, the neon glow casting shadows on Elias's face. He looked tired but resolute. I'm scared, he admitted, stirring his coffee. But I'm tired of being invisible. Mia reached across the table, squeezing his hand. You're not invisible anymore. And you're not alone. The primetime interview was electric. Elias and Mia sat side by side. Their chemistry natural. Their voices a blend of resolve and vulnerability. The anchor pressed them on Victor's lawsuit, on the hate they were facing. Elias spoke first. I've spent my life proving I belong. This isn't about revenge, it's about dignity. Mia added. Victor Langston thought he could say whatever he wanted because of who he is. But power doesn't excuse cruelty. We're holding him accountable. The audience response was overwhelming. Donations poured into a fund Mia had set up for LGBTQ+ advocacy, with Elias as its reluctant face. But Victor's team was fighting back. A smear campaign began, digging into Elias's past, Mia's journalism. Old tweets, out of context quotes anything to discredit them. Elias's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, back off, or we'll ruin you. He showed it to Mia, his jaw tight. They're not stopping. Neither are we, she said, her eyes fierce. Let's keep going. Victor's world was unraveling. His board meeting was a disaster, with shareholders demanding action. His lawsuit was faltering, and the public wasn't buying his spin. He sat alone in his penthouse, the city's lights mocking him. For the first time, he watched Elias's interview in full, not as a rival, but as a man. Elias's words, respect matters, echoed in his mind. He thought of his father, a man who'd valued strength above all else. Victor had followed that path, building an empire on dominance. But now, faced with Elias's quiet courage, he felt something shift. Not regret. Not yet, but a crack in his armor. He called Claire. Set up a meeting with Elias. Private. No cameras. Claire's silence spoke volumes. Are you sure? Just do it, Victor said, his voice low. He wasn't ready to apologize, but he needed to understand the man who'd shaken his world. Elias agreed to the meeting, against Sarah's advice. He's playing you, she warned. But Elias felt the weight of the moment. This wasn't just about him, it was about every person who'd been dismissed by someone like Victor. They met in a neutral space, a quiet conference room in Midtown. Victor sat across from Elias, his suit impeccable, his eyes guarded. Elias, in a simple sweater, met his gaze without flinching. I'm not here to apologize, Victor began, his voice cold. But I want to understand why this matters so much to you. Elias leaned forward, his voice steady. Because I'm human, and no amount of money or power gives you the right to take that away. For the first time, Victor had no response. The room was silent, the air heavy with possibility. The Midtown conference room was stark, its glass walls reflecting the tension between Elias Navarro and Victor Langston. Elias sat straight, his hands folded, his pride pinned a small beacon on his sweater. Victor, across the table, was a fortress of tailored wool and steel resolve, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of uncertainty. The silence stretched, heavy with the weight of their shared moment, 15 seconds on a plane that had spiraled into a global reckoning. Elias spoke first, his voice calm but unyielding. You asked why this matters. It's not just about me. It's about every person you've dismissed, every life you've reduced to a word. I've spent years proving I belong in that plane, in this world. You don't get to take that away. Victor's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. He wasn't used to being challenged. Not like this. Elias's words weren't loud or angry, they were steady, piercing. Victor leaned back, his fingers drumming on the table. I didn't mean it, he said finally, his voice low. It was a moment. A bad one. But you've turned it into a crusade. Elias's eyes narrowed. I didn't turn it into anything. You said what you said. The world just saw it. Outside, New York buzzed with its usual chaos. But inside, time seemed to pause. Victor had expected Elias to be emotional, reactive, someone he could outmaneuver. Instead, he faced a man who'd spent a lifetime navigating hostility with grace. It unnerved him. He thought of his own life, built on conquest, where weakness was the enemy. Yet here was Elias, strong in a way Victor didn't understand. I've got a lawsuit ready, Victor said, testing the waters. Defamation. It could ruin you. Elias didn't flinch. Go ahead. I've got nothing to hide. Can you say the same? The question hung between them, sharp as a blade. Victor's wealth, his power, had always been his shield. But now, stripped bare by a viral video, he felt exposed. He stood, pacing to the window. You think you're the victim here. But I'm the one losing everything, my reputation, my company. Elias leaned forward. You lost nothing until you spoke. I've been losing pieces of myself my whole life every time someone like you looks at me and sees less. For the first time, Victor had no retort. He stared at the city below, its lights a reminder of the empire he'd built. But Elias's words echoed his father's lessons in reverse, not strength through dominance, but strength through resilience. Mia Chun was in overdrive, her Brooklyn apartment a hub of activity. The primetime interview with Elias had pushed the story to new heights, and the advocacy fund she'd started was nearing $100. 000. But the backlash was relentless. Victor's team had dug up an old article she'd written, a piece questioning corporate ethics, and twisted it to paint her as anti-business. Trolls called her a liar, a fame seeker. She ignored them, focusing on the messages that mattered: letters from queer youth, service workers, people who saw themselves in Elias. She met Elias at a park near his apartment, the autumn leaves crunching under their feet. He looked drained, his usual warmth dimmed. I met with Langston, he said, his voice quiet. He's not sorry. Not really. Mia frowned. What did he want? To understand me, Elias said, almost laughing. Like I'm a puzzle he can solve. But I told him the truth's not the victim here. Mia nodded, her respect for him growing. You're stronger than you know, Elias. The world's seeing that. He shook his head. I don't feel strong. I feel like I'm drowning. She touched his arm. You're not. We're in this together. Victor's lawsuit moved forward, but the public wasn't swayed. The video's authenticity was ironclad, and Elias's interviews raw. Honest kept the narrative on his side. Protests outside Langston's headquarters grew, with signs reading "Respect Matters" and "No More Fairies." His board was in chaos, with 2 directors resigning. The stock was down 5% now, a bleeding wound. Victor sat in his office, scrolling through X. Elias's latest post was a photo of his pride pin, captioned, "This is who I am." No apologies. The comments were a flood of support, but Victor focused on the penis small, defiant symbol. He thought of his own life, the walls he'd built to keep vulnerability at bay. His father's voice echoed, "Never show weakness." But what if weakness wasn't what he'd been taught? He called off the lawsuit. His lawyers protested, but he was done fighting a losing battle. Instead, he drafted a statement, not an apology, but a shift. "I've heard the criticism. I'm listening. Change starts with understanding." It was vague, calculated, but it was a start. Elias saw the statement on the news, his heart a mix of skepticism and hope. Victor's words were careful, but they were something. He met with Mia again, this time at a community center where they spoke to a group of LGBTQ+ youth. Elias shared his story, his voice breaking as he described the plane, the slur, the aftermath. The kids listened, some tearful, others angry, all inspired. One teen, a shy boy named Alex, approached him after. "I'm gay," he whispered. "My dad's like Victor. He doesn't get it. But you give me hope." Elias hugged him, his own tears falling. This was why he kept going, not for fame, but for kids like Alex, for himself, for a world that could be better. Mia watched, her camera capturing the moment. She'd stopped posting for clout. Now, it was about legacy. She and Elias were building something, a movement rooted in dignity. Victor didn't sleep that night. He kept seeing Elias's face, hearing his words. No amount of money or power gives you the right to take that away. He opened his laptop, searching for Elias's interviews. He watched them all, each one chipping away at his defenses. For the first time, he saw not a threat, but a man. He typed an email to Elias. "No PR team. No filter. I was wrong. Let's talk again. No agenda." He hit send, his heart pounding. It wasn't an apology, not yet, but it was a crack in the wall. Elias Navarro stared at the email on his phone, the words blurring under the dim light of his Queens apartment. "I was wrong. Let's talk again. No agenda." Victor Langston's name glowed in the sender line, a surreal intrusion into his world. He read it again, searching for the catch, but found only raw honesty, or the closest Victor could get to it. His first instinct was to delete it, to keep the billionaire at arm's length. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the exhaustion of fighting, or maybe it was the faint hope that even men like Victor could change. He called Mia, his voice low. "Victor emailed me. Wants to meet again. Says he was wrong." Mia, on her way to a meeting with a publisher, stopped dead on the Brooklyn sidewalk. "Wrong? That's new. Do you trust him?" "No," Elias said, almost laughing. "But I'm curious. What's he playing at?" "Don't go alone," Mia warned. "I'll come with you. Or Sarah. Someone." Elias agreed, but deep down, he knew this was his to face. He replied to Victor, "Tomorrow. Same place. No cameras. No games." His finger hovered over send, then pressed down. The die was cast. Victor's penthouse felt colder than usual, the Manhattan skyline a distant glitter through the glass. He'd sent the email on impulse, a crack in his carefully built facade. His board was furious about the dropped lawsuit. His stock was still tanking, and his PR team was scrambling to spin his vague statement into something meaningful. But Victor wasn't thinking about them. He was thinking about Elias, his steady gaze, his unyielding dignity. For the first time in years, Victor felt outmatched, not by power, but by something deeper. He poured a scotch, his hands unsteady. His father's voice echoed, "Never back down." But backing down wasn't what this was. It was something else. A reckoning. Maybe. He thought of his childhood in Pittsburgh, the steel mills, the way his father had crushed any hint of softness. Victor had learned to wield power like a blade, cutting through anything that threatened his control. But Elias wasn't a thread, was a mirror, showing Victor the cost of his sharpness. The meeting was set for noon. Victor didn't know what he'd say, only that he needed to say something. The conference room was the same, but the air was different, less hostile, more fragile. Elias arrived alone, against Mia's advice, his pride pin gleaming against his dark sweater. Victor stood as he entered, a gesture that surprised them both. They sat, the table a chasm between them. "I don't know how to do this," Victor began, his voice rough. "I've never had to. But what I said on that plane, it was wrong. Not because of the video, but because it was cruel." Elias studied him, searching for sincerity. "Why now? What changed?" Victor hesitated, his fingers tracing the edge of the table. "You. The way you didn't break. I've spent my life winning. But you're stronger than that." Elias's chest tightened. He'd expected manipulation. Not this. "I didn't feel strong," he said. "I felt exposed. Like my whole life was on trial." Victor nodded, his eyes dropping. "I didn't see you. Not as a person. I saw a target. Something to push down to feel bigger." The admission hung heavy. Elias leaned forward. "Do you know what it's like to walk through the world knowing people like you can erase you with a word? I've fought for every inch of my blasphemy family. My job. My identity. You don't get to take that lightly." "I'm starting to understand," Victor said, his voice quiet. "I'm not good at this. But I want to try." Mia was at the community center, speaking to a group of queer teens alongside Sarah. The advocacy fund had grown, and they were planning a scholarship in Elias's name. But her mind was on him, wondering how the meeting was going. She checked her Fanino updates. The hate mail had slowed, but the support was overwhelming. A petition to remove Victor as CEO had 200,000 signatures, and protests continued outside his headquarters. She posted an update on X. "Elias is meeting with Victor Langston today. Whatever happens, he's shown us what courage looks like. Respect matters." The responses flooded in, a mix of hope and skepticism. Mia knew the risks. Victor could be playing a long game, using Elias to salvage his image. But she trusted Elias's instincts. Back in the conference room, Elias felt the weight of Victor's words. They weren't an apology. Not fully, but they were a start. He thought of Alex, the teen from the community center, and the countless others watching this story unfold. "If you mean it," Elias said, "it's not enough to say you're wrong. You have to show it. Not for me, for everyone you've hurt." Victor nodded, his face unreadable. "What does that look like?" Elias didn't have an answer. Not yet. But the question itself was progress. They parted without promises, but with an understanding, a fragile thread connecting two men who'd never expected to share anything. That night, Elias spoke at another community event, his voice stronger now. He told his story, not as a victim, but as a survivor. The crowd, teens, parents, activists hung on his words. Mia filmed it, her heart swelling. This was bigger than a video, bigger than a lawsuit. It was a movement. Victor, alone in his penthouse, watched the live stream. Elias's voice filled the room, steady and unapologetic. Victor opened his laptop, drafting a new statement. This time, it wasn't vague. "I was wrong to demean Elias Navarro. His dignity exposed my failure. I'm stepping back as CEO to reflect and learn. Change isn't a statement, it's action." He didn't send it. Not yet. But the words were there, waiting. Elias Navarro stood at the edge of a small stage in a Brooklyn community center, the room packed with faces young, old, hopeful, angry. The spotlight was soft, but it felt like the sun, warming the pride pin on his chest. He'd spoken at events before, but tonight was different. Tonight, he wasn't just a flight attendant or a viral figure, he was a voice for those who'd been silenced. "I didn't choose this fight," he said, his voice steady. "But I'm here now, and I'm not backing down." The crowd erupted, their applause a wave that carried him. Mia Chen stood in the back, her camera steady, capturing every word. The advocacy fund had hit $250, 000, and the scholarship in Elias's name was official. But more than the money, it was the stories that poured in: letters, emails, messages from people who saw themselves in him. A trans barista in Ohio, a gay teacher in Texas, a non-binary teen in California. Elias was their mirror, their hope. He thought of Victor Langston, their meeting still raw in his mind. Victor's admission, "I was wrong," had been a crack in the billionaire's armor. But Elias wasn't naive. Words weren't enough. Yet the possibility of change, however faint, kept him going. He ended his speech with a call: "We don't need apologies. We need action. Respect isn't a gift, it's a right." Victor sat in his penthouse, the city's lights dimmed by his mood. His draft statement was still unsent, its words heavy with a truth he wasn't used to facing. "I'm stepping back as CEO." He'd built his empire on control, but control had failed him. The protests outside his headquarters hadn't stopped, and his board was in chaos. His stock was down 8%, a wound that bled trust. He watched Elias's speech on a live stream, the flight attendant's voice cutting through the noise of his world. Elias wasn't loud or vengeful, was resolute, human. Victor thought of his father, whose lessons had forged him into a man who saw vulnerability as failure. But Elias's strength wasn't in dominance. It was in standing tall despite the world's weight. Victor hit send. The statement went live on X. Unfiltered, unpolished. "I was wrong to demean Elias Navarro. His dignity exposed my failure. I'm stepping back as CEO to reflect and learn." Change isn't a statement, it's action. The internet exploded: shock, praise, skepticism. Langston steps down trended. But Victor didn't read the comments. He didn't need to. For the first time, he felt unburdened. Mia saw the statement first, her phone buzzing as she left the community center. She showed it to Elias, her eyes wide. He actually did it. He's stepping down. Elias stared at the screen, his heart a tangle of disbelief and relief. "It's a start," he said finally. "But it's not the end." They walked through Brooklyn, the night air crisp. Mia's camera was off, her focus on Elias. "You changed him," she said. "Not completely, but enough." Elias shook his head. "I didn't change him. The truth did." "You did. With that video." Mia smiled, a rare softness in her fierce demeanor. "We did it together." They stopped at a park. The cities hum a distant lullaby. Elias thought of his mother, who'd called him that morning, her voice thick with pride. "Mijo, you're showing the world who you are." He thought of Alex, the teen who'd found hope in his story. And he thought of Victor, a man who'd built walls but was starting to dismantle them. Months later, the story had shifted but not faded. Victor's resignation was permanent, his company under new leadership. He'd started funding LGBTQ+ initiatives, small steps that Elias watched with cautious optimism. The scholarship in Elias's name grew, helping queer youth chase dreams he'd once thought impossible. Mia's journalism career soared, her work now a beacon for truth. Elias returned to the skies, his uniform crisp, his pride pinned brighter than ever. The cabin was his stage again, but now he walked it differently, not just surviving, but thriving. Passengers recognized him, some whispering, others offering quiet thanks. He smiled, his warmth a defiance of its own. One flight, a young man in coach stopped him, his voice shy. "You're Elias, right? I saw your story. It helped me come out to my family." Elias's throat tightened. "I'm glad," he said, his hand on the boy's shoulder. "You're enough, just as you are." Victor, now far from the spotlight, sat in a small cafe, reading a letter from Elias. It was simple, direct. Thank you for listening. Keep going. Victor folded it carefully, a rare smile breaking through. He wasn't redeemed. Not yet. But he was learning. The world was bigger than his empire. And for the first time, he wanted to understand it. The video that started it all still lived online. A reminder of a moment that changed 3 lives: Elias, Mia, Victor, and countless others. It wasn't just a story of conflict. It was a story of humanity, of the power of standing up, of the courage to change. And in the skies above, Elias flew on, his heart full, his fight far from over.